Over the dark night, she reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Well, welcome back. Good afternoon. Greetings. You know, there's a lot happening on the African continent with the rise of the Alliance of Sahel States and the ripple effect from the alliance that Burkina Faso's interim president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Mali's president, General Assimi Goïta, and Niger's president, Abdourahamane Tchiani have formed. But West Africa is not the only very dynamic region on the continent. Eritrea, Sudan, South Sudan, and Ethiopia are all involved in struggle and change. You want to know what's behind all of this? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events occur. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historical context in which they take place, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is East Africa, particularly the Horn of Africa. What's happening in Eritrea? What's happening in Sudan, South Sudan? What's behind a lot of these very seismic changes that are taking place right now on the continent? My guest is an Eritrean-American journalist who hosts his own YouTube channel, and he covers Eritrea's hard-won independence. He is Elias Amare. Elias, welcome to Connecting the Dots.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. I'm a great fan of your show, Connecting the Dots, a very important show that not only focuses on the African diaspora, but on the African continent itself, and it does connect the dots, and I am a great fan. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, thank you, because it's great guests like yourself that enable me to do this. So thank you for your time today. There's a great piece in The Economist entitled "What a Massacre Reveals About Abiy Ahmed Ali's Ethiopia." It starts 2 months ago in the early afternoon of March 31st. Gunfire erupted in Birakat, a town in the Amhara region of northern Ethiopia. After the army had taken control of the town, a massacre began. What is going on here with this conflict? What's behind the conflict, and how does Eritrea play into all of this?
Well, I'm not a fan of The Economist. It does dish out a lot of disinformation, in particular when it relates to African issues. But in this case, it's only forced to reflect the reality on the ground in Ethiopia. Sadly, a bitter civil war is raging in that big country of the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, the southern neighbor of Eritrea, with whom Eritrea has had, shall we say, on and off conflicts for the past 6-7 decades. But in Ethiopia right now, the regime of the ruling party of Abiy Ahmed Ali, the Prosperity Party, is waging war against the Amhara people, against the Oromo insurgents, to the north also the Tigray war that has been raging since 2022 has not quite died off. So in all corners of the country, civil wars, particularly ethnically instigated conflicts are raging, which do not bode well for stability of the Horn of Africa. It's very worrisome development, I must say. And the economy of Ethiopia also is in dire straits. It's a case of misleadership by the man who seized power in 2018. There was great hope when he came to power, supposedly under a reform agenda, that he would end the era of ethnic politics in that country, that he would usher in peace within Ethiopia, but peace more importantly with its northern neighbor, Eritrea, my country. We welcomed it. The entire Horn of Africa applauded him. The people of Ethiopia applauded him. But this foolish man squandered it all. And now, 6 years or 7 years after he came to power, we are witnessing a very sad situation in Ethiopia, which worries all of us in the Horn of Africa.
And do you have any real insight into what's behind? Was it that his politics changed? Was it that he was really operating all along as an ally of the West, as a proxy for the West, similar to what's happening in Ukraine? Do you have any idea what were the dynamics behind all of this that dashed your hopes?
Well, as I said, when initially he came to power, I mean, behind him was the party, the Oromo People's Democratic Organization, but other alliances also, the Amhara National Movement or ADP, the Amhara Democratic People's Movement, as it was called. So an alliance revolted against the minority rule of the TPLF, the Tigrayan People's Front. Now, you have to bear in mind, since 1991, when the TPLF seized power, it practiced ethnic politics, which is very dangerous in the African context. A country like Ethiopia with 82 different ethnic groups, some of them are big nations like the Oromo, the Amhara, some with 5 million population, some with 10 million. I don't like the term tribe. This with the late great writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Tribe is something that they designate to Africa. How is it that a tiny population, let's say in Europe, is called a nation, but big ethnic groups or nations like Yoruba or with 10 million, 30 million population are called tribes? So let's stay away from the designation of the tribe, but let's, to be on the safe side, stay with the designation of ethnic groups. If you introduce ethnic politics in a country like Ethiopia, it's a recipe for disaster. So that is, I think, what a lot of people had hoped for, that he would end this toxic ethnic politics and introduce a citizen-based democratic reform into that country. But he's still stuck into that quagmire of ethnic politics. But who is behind him? Definitely imperialism, because in 2019, they awarded him the Nobel Peace Prize, just barely 1 year into his, after he came to power. The reason, of course, was that he made peace with Eritrea, and that, okay, let's give the benefit of doubt to the Nobel Committee in Norway, and let's welcome this development. But within 2 years, war erupted in the north, in Tigray. War erupted in Oromo. Supposedly his home base, because he hails from the Oromo nation, which is about 30 million, one of the largest nations, nationalities in Ethiopia. But he did not end the ethnic politics. Moreover, he continued foolish economic projects, squandering scarce resources on white elephant vanity projects within the capital, building palaces, gardens, and what have you. So far, it is said, it's reported that over $10 billion were wasted in these projects. So these are projects that are designed for kleptocratic, fat cuts of regime to steal the country's wealth away, and that is continuing. Ethnic conflict has been exacerbated far, far worse than when the TPLF was in power in 27 years. Bear in mind the 27 years misrule of the TPLF itself was with the support of the US and with the support of the European Union. It was a client regime, an anchor state in the Horn of Africa region. So this man is also continuing that, but at a far worse scale, far, far worse than the TPLF. So this is where we are, unfortunately. That hope was dashed. We had great hope for a new beginning. The peace between Eritrea and Ethiopia expanded to include Somalia in 2018. So this tripartite peace was hoped that it would grow and include Sudan. But unfortunately, they managed to scuttle that peace. And by they, I mean, who I'm referring to, the powers that shouldn't be, the US imperialism and its Western allies in Europe.
Well, I want to just hit on this ethnic politics for one more point, and that is when we look at how Europe carved the continent into countries and either seem to ignore the ethnic politics or used those ethnic politics as a way to empower smaller ethnic groups to control larger ethnic groups. I think when we look at what happened in Rwanda, that would be, I think, an example of that. Is what we're seeing play itself out in Ethiopia, and another example of the danger of the colonists either ignoring the ethnic politics or using the ethnic politics and the conflict and dynamics that stems from that as a way of control.
Somewhat so, but Ethiopia was never colonized. It was the exception. It was the anomaly in this case. Ethiopia and Liberia were the only two countries in Africa that were not colonized during the scramble for Africa by European colonialism in late 19th century.
I was using the colonization as an example of what's playing itself out now.
I see what you mean. Yes. In that sense, the colonizers during their rule of Africa or their loot and plunder period of Africa, of course, used ethnic divisions to divide and conquer. That's how they managed to control the continent. They would designate so-called tribal chiefs, and through them introduce, this is this tribe's land and that's that tribe's land. So sort of create Bantustans, ethnic Bantustans, to divide and pit the ethnic groups, the nation's nationalities against each other. So Ethiopia should have avoided this. And during the era of Emperor Haile Selassie, the Derg, the military junta of Mengistu Haile Mariam, ethnic politics was never practiced. I think it was in 1991 that the mistake was made. And ethnic politics leads to disaster. I mean, if you introduce ethnic politics in African context and formalize it, in terms of it's enshrined in the constitution in the form of ethnic federalism, so the killils or regions that are created based on ethnicity there are about 8 to 10, I don't know, now they may have reached 10 kills, ethnic states within the Ethiopian federal state, okay? But where does one ethnic group's land end and the other? There is always interlapping of territory. There's intermarriage. There's in pre-colonial times such things as this is this ethnic group's border and that ethnic group ends here. Such things did not exist. So by introducing and formalizing it in the constitution and ethnic federalism, what you would create essentially was ethnic Bantustans, for lack of better terms, just like apartheid South Africa practiced during apartheid in South Africa. I remember it pitted the nations, the Zulu Bantustan, this other group, and they called them Bantustans for a reason, yeah, because they wanted to divide and have the black ethnic groups of South Africa constantly fighting each other. Of course, the white minority expropriated the vast fertile land for themselves. In the case of Ethiopia, I think such kind of politics should never have been introduced. And there was hope that in 2018, with the coming of the so-called reform government, that this would end. But this never ended. And we are witnessing now a terrible situation unfolding in Ethiopia, which is a nightmare scenario if it continues along this line. God knows what will happen. The writing on the wall does not bode well for Ethiopia and for the Horn of Africa unless something is done urgently. And we need to focus on that.
Ann Garrison did an excellent interview with you in Black Agenda Report. And I just want to read the first two paragraphs to give some context to this discussion. On May 24th, Eritrea celebrated its 34th Independence Day. From September 1st, 1961 to May 24th, 1991, the Eritrean people waged a 30-year war to free themselves from the Ethiopian Empire, first under the control of Emperor Haile Selassie and then under Mengistu Haile Mariam. Eritrea was the first of 5 nations now refusing to collaborate with AFRICOM, the U.S. Africa Command. It has also refused to saddle itself with IMF or World Bank debt, but the African Development Bank has praised its progress and provided funding for one of its renewable energy projects for its education initiatives. What is it about Eritrea that enabled its people to wage this war, a 30-year war of independence, and to refuse to subject themselves to the wishes of the IMF and the World Bank?
It's a very good question. I mean, Eritrea should have been free, independent country in the 1940s when Italian colonialism ended in 1941 in that country. But it was U.S. strategic interests in the emergent Cold War, okay? After 1941, the Second World War ended. The U.S. became the preeminent power, global economic giant. Of course, there was the Soviet Union on the other side. So for the U.S. at that time, the control of the Red Sea was very, very important. Why? Because it had already secured the oil wealth of the Gulf of Arabia through Saudi Arabia and Iran. The Red Sea was a vital waterway linking, oil shipment to Europe through the Suez Canal. So very, very vital strategic area. So for that reason, the U.S. decided to practice the first steps of neocolonialism in Africa and forcibly had Eritrea annexed with Ethiopia, which at that time under Emperor Haile Selassie was seeking sea access. So that way they could easily control Ethiopia. And for that, the Americans, the US was granted the largest military base in Africa, right inside Eritrea's capital, Asmara. And from there, they could monitor. There is something very particular about the altitude and the atmosphere of Eritrea. At that time, there was no satellite technology. So radio communication of the Soviets was easily intercepted. Very vital military base for the Americans. And it's for that reason that Eritrea was forcibly annexed to Ethiopia. But once annexed, the brutality, the massacre, the discrimination continued at unprecedented stage until the Eritrean people decide in 1961, the year I was born, incidentally, that enough is enough. All peaceful political protest is leading to nowhere, so we have to take up arms. Initially, to some extent, inspired by the Algerian liberation movement, which was raging against the French in the north of Africa. So they established the Eritrean Liberation Front, and through many ups and downs, against all odds, in 30 years, fighting a huge neighbor, Ethiopia, 20 times its size. Ethiopia supported at one time, up to 1975, by the United States. And from 1975 on, by the Soviets, the Mengistu Haile Mariam Derg regime was supported by the Soviets and the Eastern European allies. But against this all odds, Eritreans won their independence. So it is one struggle that needs to be studied in Africa. That a small people, if determined, if united, because Eritrea had two major religions, 9 ethnic groups. There were many frictions initially, but the Eritrean revolutionary leaders managed to chart a progressive path, uniting all these ethnic groups, submerging all sub-national divisions, fostering national unity, raising a revolutionary agenda to educate, to politicize, and arm the masses, using the mass organizations for workers, students, women, peasants, and what have you. And thus, Eritreans managed to achieve the impossible against all odds and won their victory, total military defeat in 1991, of course, with an alliance of Ethiopian opposition movement, in particular the Tigrayan People's Liberation Movement, which unfortunately later reversed course and ignited war against Eritrea in 1998. But the vicissitudes, the ups and downs, the tremendous challenge that the Eritrean struggle passed through need to be studied in Africa. I, without a doubt, say that it can be a vanguard, a shining model for African revolutionaries to study. Self-reliance was very, very important in the struggle. And I think it's that legacy of self-reliance, of fierce independence, taking our independence and sovereignty seriously, refusing the neo-colonial path and sticking to our guns, sticking to our principles, that in the past 34 years of independence managed to have us still standing tall, unbowed, and against all odds. Also, within this past 34 years of independence, there has been tremendous hostilities to demonize Eritrea, to put sanctions against it, to wage war, proxy wars against it from its neighbors, client state of Ethiopia in 1998 to 2000, others like Sudan trying to spread Islamic Jihad terror into Eritrea. But against this all odds, Eritrea stood firm and managed to achieve significant developments in terms of education for all, healthcare for all, emancipation of women, improvement of enrollment of girls in schools, reduction of infant mortality, reduction of communicable tropical diseases such as malaria, tuberculosis, cholera, and what have you, HIV/AIDS. Very, very commendable under difficult and harsh conditions. So I think the Eritrean example needs to be studied in Africa, in particular in our emergent young allies in the African Sahel States of West Africa, the Alliance of Sahel States.
You know, beyond the geography of Eritrea being a coastal country on the Red Sea, there's also, when you look at the topography of the country, there seems to be a tremendous series of rivers and running throughout the entire country. So access to water, agriculture, I would think would enable Eritrea to feed itself, to sustain itself in the manner in which you are articulating, enabling it to better stave off the encroachment from entities such as the IMF and the World Bank.
A very good point you raised. I'm glad you reminded me on that. One of the things Eritrea focused in the past 34 years is that we have to be food secure. We have to ensure food security for our people. We have to stay away from food aid dependency. And thus, the state invested heavily in building big dams, medium and small scale dams to preserve the water and use it for agriculture, using irrigation away from the traditional rain-fed agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Eritrea is not as water-rich as Ethiopia. Ethiopia, further to our southern giant neighbor, has huge rivers, vast fertile land. But Ethiopia has not managed to wean itself out of food aid. It has been dependent, sadly, on food aid for the past decades.
Mm-hmm.
Eritrea, from the get-go, from the beginning, realized this danger that's still haunting all the countries of Africa. And this is a design. They crippled Africa's agriculture. Africa is rich in agricultural resources. Africa could not only feed itself, but export, crops and what have you to other continents. At this point, though, under neocolonialism, many African states, their agriculture has been crippled or devastated, and to a large extent, they have become dependent on food aid. This is a sad situation. This quagmire, this trap, Eritrea managed to avoid, like you said, through building dams, through careful investment in agriculture, using modern technology like tractors, irrigation farming, drip irrigation farming. Eritrea is also on the Sahel belt. The desertification is encroaching every year. So to reverse that, massive tree planting, terracing projects have been undertaken, and in the past 34 years, there have been commendable results. I think in this regard, again, our brothers and sisters in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger can learn a lot from the Eritrean experience. You can do, with very little resources, you can achieve a lot. You can achieve food self-sufficiency, food security, food sovereignty. And once you do that, the imperialist powers do not have something to pressure you with, arm twist, and have you sort of a diktat, just like the IMF, World Bank, loans that are debt trap, not being food secure, not having ensured food sufficiency, food security, and food sovereignty also exposes you to external pressures, and thus you become another neo-colonial vassal state if you don't do that. But once having achieved agriculture, Eritrea realizes you can also slowly build upon that to transition into the next step of industrialization. At first, industrialization based on agriculture, but later with all other capacities.
You mentioned the Alliance of Sahel States and what they can learn from the process that Eritrea has been able to establish and sustain itself. How are those politics, how are those Sahelian politics playing in Eritrea? Are they? What is the relationship? What is the dynamic as Traoré and those in Mali and Niger as those politics are developing and seeming to spread to other countries in the region?
Well, we in Eritrea, I can say, at least those politically conscious and those like me who are convinced that the only way forward for Africa is to end neocolonialism and through radical revolutionary Pan-Africanism ensure the unity of the continent and thus end the 5 centuries of humiliation of our continent, of our African peoples. We are watching what is happening in the Alliance of Sahel States, in Mali, Burkina Faso, in Niger, with fascination. This is something that needs to be supported, and we are trying to make linkages. Of course, there is the long distance divide, the linguistic divide that colonialism imposed upon us. The Francophonie Africa only speak French. They are not capable. They are not fluent in English. So a lot of the things that is happening in our part of the world, in Eastern Africa, just for lack of translation and what have you, may not reach their ears. I mean, the ears of the masses of those 3 countries. But I'm sure linkages are slowly being established. I can say, for example, when Captain Ibrahim Traoré came to the Russia-Africa summit, I believe about 2 years ago, where a lot of other, our President Elias Amare was there, gave a very powerful speech there, President Elias Amare. So did Captain Ibrahim Traoré. I'm sure both had taken note of each other's visions, of each other's statements, not only him, but the other 2 countries, his neighbors, Mali and Niger as well. Within a year also, there was a Saudi Africa summit in Saudi Arabia in 2023, 2 years ago. There, both Eritrea and the 3 countries, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, were present. Eritrea was represented by its president, but there were meetings on the sideline with the prime minister of I believe Niger, the foreign minister of Mali, and the speaker of parliament of Burkina Faso. So I have no doubt that there are hopes and that bridges are being built. Now, third point I want to mention, in South Africa during the BRICS summit there also 2 years ago, President Elias Amare had traveled also there, and in his very powerful speech there, our President Elias Amare of Eritrea, I'm talking about, that speech is available on the internet. He mentioned the fact that of Niger's wealth of uranium being looted by France for decades, for pittance, for cents. And he said, this is nothing but modern slavery. Imagine, he said, President Elias Amare, if that uranium was harnessed, it could electrify the entire continent of Africa. We could build nuclear power stations that could provide cheap energy, which is very important for industrialization. First of all, of the entire West Africa, but secondly, Africa has a lot of uranium resources. There is plenty of uranium in Namibia, in the Congo, in Mali. I'm sure that there are some prospects for uranium. Who knows? We in Eritrea too may have some uranium. That's perhaps one of the reasons that Eritrea is constantly under the being targeted, is that Eritrea has huge mineral resources, just like the Sahelian states. So in Sahelian states, they are saying, we want to take control of our wealth, of our resources. No more of this neocolonial relationship with France. This is devastating nightmare scenario for the imperialism, for the Western countries, in particular France. Now, in this regard, I want to mention, since we have started talking about French neocolonialism in Africa. At one point, France's president, Jacques Chirac, I think in the 1990s, he said, without Africa, France would just be a third-rate power. It is Africa's wealth, the wealth of its 14 former colonies, which France has managed to entrap under the CFA franc system of neocolonialism, that enables France to become a great power. It loots and plunders them. It keeps puppet leaders in these countries, and managed to enrich itself at the expense of this Africa by impoverishing these African countries. That is the neocolonial setup of France and the Francophonie Africa. Whenever in the Francophonie region, a revolutionary leader like Thomas Sankara emerges and says, enough is enough, we don't want to go this route, he is removed, just as they did with him. Thomas Sankara, another brilliant revolutionary leader in Burkina Faso from 1983 to 1987, was going along that self-reliance path of revolutionary development path to end neocolonialism. This was for the French very threatening, and they managed to have him removed by hiring traitors. One of his former comrades, Blaise Compaoré, was complicit in his assassination. So I'm hoping that the young leaders like Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso, Assimi Goïta in Mali, and Abdourahamane Tchiani in Niger have learned their lesson. From what I am seeing, the fact that they have formed this confederation, this alliance, assures me that they have learned their lessons from that disaster of the 1980s and have united to protect their gains, which is very, very important for the rest of Africa.
The power or the influence of this alliance seems to be spreading. The prime minister from Senegal was in Burkina Faso meeting with President Traoré. And also now I've been reading reports that Togo has cracked down on new mining licenses to foreign entities within the country. And that, to me, and as I'm reading the report, they're saying that the basis of this, or the reason for this, is to start to process their own natural resources in-house so they can strengthen their own economy, so that they can build and provide jobs for more people in the country. And I find that interesting because, as I understand it, Togo has been governed by one family for a number of years. And for Togo now to make a shift of this nature, seems to me they're getting very clearly the sense, because also they border Burkina Faso, that they're getting the sense that change is in the wind, and if they don't change, they will be overcome by change. Your thoughts?
Yes, this is new development. I was not aware. Just before we came online, you forwarded that news to me.
Mm-hmm.
Still, I am in agreement with you here that the radical changes happening in the Alliance of Sahelian States are already, their influence is beginning to spread throughout West Africa. Like you said, Togo is not it's not exactly a model of a revolutionary country, or is not is not even let's say sufficiently nationalist independent country. Yet they see that unless they follow the path, the new trend, they could be swept away perhaps. Either way, though, the fact that they are calling for a fair share of their own mineral resources is good news. And hopefully this will spread throughout Western Africa. Hopefully there also the neocolonial setup that has been controlling the region, the regional bloc I'm talking about, ECOWAS, will be forced to either reform drastically, to give the Alliance of Sahel States a break, not to become a threat to what they are doing. Because initially, as you remember, Dr. Leon, Nigeria was threatening to invade its neighbor, to send military to disrupt Niger. It was only when there was tremendous pushback from the Nigerian population, because the same population straddles the border of both countries. They share same culture, same history. So the neocolonial state in Nigeria, led by Tinubu, had to back off that. But the Western countries will try all kinds of shenanigans to disrupt this new experiment in the Alliance of Sahel State. It must be nurtured, it must be protected, and we need to rally behind them to make sure that it is not squashed as before in the 1980s.
The Jamon asks, why do you think it is that Traoré and Burkina Faso get so much negative press despite being in confederation with the other Sahelian states? And let me add, I find it interesting, not only is the press negative, but there's very little press in terms of Western press. The story that I just mentioned about Togo, very hard to find. I mean, you can find some things on YouTube, you can find some things on Facebook, but trying to find a major Western media outlet providing information on this is virtually impossible. So you can go from hardly any media coverage to, the Jamon's point, the media coverage that you do find is incredibly negative.
Indeed, it is one Western media is a great propaganda machine. It conducts war by media. If there is any good news coming out of Africa, they will either completely ignore it, shut it off, or distort it, put some disinformation into it, so that the average reader in the West cannot recognize truth from lies. The second is demonization. It is not surprised that they are demonizing at this point in time Ibrahim Traoré. He must be doing something, as African people and people of African descent in the West must also take it as a rule of thumb. Whenever Western mainstream media demonizes an African country, that African country must be doing something good, something great. We in Eritrea are immune to this in the sense that we have been through tremendous demonization, lies, and distortions. If you Google Eritrea, immediately the top 10 will come all kinds of nasty things about Eritrea, all completely baseless or distorted disinformation or misinformation.
All this discussion about human rights violations.
The same thing will be happening to human rights, dictatorship, the North Korea of Africa, the oppressive regime in Africa, and what have you, poverty, youth fleeing the country. A very doom and gloom scenario about Eritrea, the picture about Eritrea emerges if you depend on Western mainstream media or the propaganda media, as I prefer to call them. So it doesn't come as a surprise that they are demonizing Ibrahim Traoré right now. Of course, what they are trying to do is they are trying to separate the three states. So they concentrate their guns on Ibrahim Traoré and would somehow seem to be lenient on Mali and Niger. And thus create a wedge of division between the three states. We must not give them any chance in that regard. We must counter this propaganda.
And let me see here. Dejuma Boutique, we have to be careful with Togo. This is a move for self-preservation. Togo was the template for a coup and assassination in Africa against Olympio. And I did say in framing my question that Togo is run by a despotic family and that this is their attempt to get in front of change before change overwhelms them. That was my point. A move for self-preservation. Your thoughts?
I agree with you again there. It is the winds of change are blowing in West Africa. Finally, this revolutionary, this potential revolutionary path, breaking the chains of neocolonialism, emerging in the neighboring countries. So countries like Togo is a very small country. It's not as big as Nigeria, which has some wherewithal to resist the winds of change coming from its northern neighbors. So I think what the Togo ruling family this leadership political class is trying to do is to bend with the wind, to somehow try to accommodate this wind of political change by trying to claim fair share of their own mineral resources. But still, this is welcome. We need to welcome it. We need to have the other neocolonial states also to have the courage to stand up against neocolonial masters in a similar way.
Let me see, where did it go? Oh, so the Juma Boutique again says, Samora Michel says to his people, if the West say something good about me, know that I have betrayed you. I do not want them to say anything good about me. And that just motivated me to go to my bookcase and get this booklet or pamphlet, 2 speeches by Samora Michel.
Yes, indeed. Luta continua, as he used to say. The struggle continues. In the past decades, whenever good leaders, radical revolutionary leaders like Samora Machel in Mozambique, Amilcar Cabral in Guinea, Kwame Nkrumah, of course, the great founding father of Pan-Africanism in Ghana, emerged, Patrice Lumumba in Congo, Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, Madibu Keita earlier in Mali. Whenever leaders like that emerged, they eliminated them. So that was the disaster of the past 6-7 decades of neocolonialism for Africa. And Samora Machel is being proven prophetic in what our brother quoted.
So we have just about 10 minutes left. And if you were to meet someone on the street and they were to say, Elias, tell me what are the three most fundamental things you want people to know about Eritrea, its struggle for independence, and more importantly, its ability to maintain its independence?
Again, tall order to summarize with 3 short points.
Okay, 4
but
points.
But I would say, okay, quickly. Okay, one is to believe that you have the capacity, only you have the capacity to free yourself. Never be afraid of the big powers. No matter how big they appear, there is tremendous power within us. If we unite, if we have correct leadership, if we are free from corruption, we can do it. We can free ourselves. Eritrea proves that. Against all odds, it has done that. Secondly, I think self-reliance is important. We have to rely on ourselves, on our own mental capacity first and foremost. We are very intelligent people in Africa. We are the birthplace of humanity. We are the birthplace of many civilizations, including the great Egypt. Capt is an African civilization that in its time was one of the greatest civilizations in the world. So we need to have that kind of self-confidence that propels us to practice self-reliance, using our own resources, our own human capacity, our own intelligence, our own professional network, our own education towards economic development. Self-reliance does not mean isolation, by the way. It means that first and foremost, you have to rely on your own resources. And then I think dedicated leadership is very important. Leadership that is free from corruption, that is completely focused on development of its people. They will try to entrap new leaders through trinkets, through bribes of a few $1 million here, a few $1 million there. That, I think, is what the youth of Africa must focus on, to reject this tempting traps that the West managed to set and derail many projects in Africa. I think the other, though, is that unity is important, the unity of the African continent. One country alone, even if it resists in the long run, it will face tremendous challenges. It cannot do it by itself. It needs allies in its neighborhood. What we are trying to do in Eritrea is what the Alliance of Sahel States have managed to do shortly. In 2-3 years, they realized the danger and said, no, we need a confederation. We need to unite. United, we are 72 million. Divided, we are 17 million in Burkina Faso, 17 million in... anyways, if they manage to unite, which they have done, they can withstand imperialist aggression, terrorism, and what have you. They can also have a wider economic base, market to trade with, to exchange goods, and what have you. That, I think, is what Eritrea has been trying to do in the Horn of Africa, but it has not found allies yet. That's why we see what is happening in Western Africa. That's music to our ears. That, I think, needs to be replicated. I'm glad, for example, that the Alliance of Sahel States removed itself. The 3 states removed themselves from ECOWAS. We have the same situation in Eastern Africa, a regional bloc called IGAD, completely financed, dominated by Western imperialism. A useless, toothless regional bloc. Finally, Eritrea got fed up with this puppet bloc, IGAD, which is the ECOWAS of Eastern Africa, and said enough is enough. We don't want anything to have to do, with this with the setup. So I think that that kind of what is being.
Oh, I think we just lost our connection, and you know what, one of the biggest takeaways that I have from what Brother Elias just articulated, the same thing the same analysis applies to the African American community. Everything that he just said about what has transpired in Eritrea, what has enabled them to not only achieve their independence, but to sustain their independence, are the very same things that as African Americans, we need to start taking into account or take into consideration for our politics. And the sooner that we are able to take that into account for our politics, the stronger of a political element we will become. But as long as we, as African Americans or Africans in America, depending on how you want to define yourself, as the longer that we keep believing in this two-party dynamic, we will continue to be subjected to the same circumstances that we have always been. Brother Elias, I was just saying that the very things that you just articulated about Eritrea are the very same things that could be applied to the politics of the African American community here. And that the sooner we understand that here, the stronger we're going to be. We got about 2 minutes.
I'm sorry, my laptop's battery died on me. I didn't realize I was not hooked to the electric power. Anyways, thank you very much for your patience. That is vital. That's very, very important. Unity. We need to emphasize on that. We need to remain united. Our enemies will always find devious means of penetrating and cracking our unity.
In fact, if I could.
What Amilcar Cabral called the cancer of betrayal. We always need to be vigilant about that. He said at the funeral of the great Kwame Nkrumah, what killed Kwame Nkrumah was not cancer. What killed him was the cancer of betrayal from within. So if you could, I'm sorry, continue.
Well, you know, when you use the word unity, what that brought to mind is that doesn't mean that we all think the same way and we all do the same things. It means that we unite around understanding the common enemy, the common oppressor, that we are in the same struggle, whether or not we believe the same things. We don't have to operate the same way, but we do have to operate in a unified manner because we are fighting the same oppressor. We got about a minute.
Exactly. The end goal is for all of us the same. The development, the freedom of our peoples, wherever we are, Africans, we have to end 5 centuries of humiliation. The Chinese are very, very angry of that 1 century of humiliation they call. Then they said, never again will we have that kind of humiliation. Africa had 5 centuries of humiliation. The end goal, objective, we will all agree, is the freedom of our people, the development of the African continent, and the development of African people wherever they are, be in the Americas, be in the Caribbean, in Latin America, where have you. The end of racism, the end of white supremacy. On those broad long-term objectives, we are all in agreement. How do we, what political path do we take, what ideology? We may differ, but we need to have some uniting vision and goal. And I think the final goal of Africa's freedom and development, we can all agree upon. On that, we unite and we never divide. I think the Alliance of Sahel States experiment in that regard is something that needs to be applauded and supported.
Brother Elias Amare, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Greatly, greatly appreciate that analysis. Again, welcome to the show and look forward to having you back.
Thank you very much, Dr. Leon, for having me as a guest. And let's continue the conversation. And I always follow what you are. For those, I have a huge, somewhat big subscriber base. If you would allow me to upload this on my channel.
Oh, absolutely. Please do.
I will say to them, please subscribe to Connecting the Dots and follow it regularly, because that is what we need to do, to connect the dots and strengthen our unity.
We sent you the link. Feel free, please do. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. And folks, thank you all for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Stay tuned. New episode tomorrow. We will be talking about Venezuela, and we will be talking about the politics of Venezuela with Tulio Virguez. I think that's how you pronounce the last name. Please follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show. Those of you that are watching on other platforms, please subscribe via YouTube. We greatly appreciate that. And remember, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. Why? Because it's rhetoric-free podcasting. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.